There's something in your trading that you don't see. It doesn't show on the chart. It's not in your strategy, and no indicator will ever reveal it. But it's there, in every decision you make. Your ego. And the dangerous part is, it doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like confidence. It feels like certainty. It feels like you know what you're doing. But that feeling is exactly what starts to destroy your trades. Because ego doesn't just show up when you're wrong. It shows up even more when you think you're right. You take a trade. It's clean. It's valid. It's part of your plan. Price moves against you. Just a little at first. Nothing serious. But instead of accepting it, you start thinking, no, it will come back. You don't want to be wrong. So you hold. It drops more. Now your stop loss is close, but instead of letting it hit, you move it. Just a bit more space. Not because your setup changed, but because your ego refuses to accept the loss. And in that moment, you've already broken your system. Not because the market forced you to, but because your ego did. And this is how it begins. Small decisions. Small adjustments, small moments where you choose being right over being disciplined. And it doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels justified. It feels logical. But over time, those small moments become habits. You stop taking losses properly. You stop following your plan. You start protecting your pride instead of your capital. And slowly, your trading changes. You hold losers longer. You cut winners early. You revenge trade after a loss, trying to get it back. Not because your system told you to, but because your ego can't accept being wrong. And that's where things get dangerous. Because now you're not trading the market anymore. You're trading your emotions. You're trading your identity. Every trade becomes personal. Every loss feels like failure. Every win feels like validation. And once trading becomes personal, you lose control. Because now you're not trying to follow a process. You're trying to prove something. To yourself, to the market, to anyone watching. And the market doesn't care about that. It doesn't care if you're right. It doesn't care if you're confident. It doesn't care about your ego. It only responds to one thing. Your execution. And if your execution is driven by ego, then every decision becomes distorted. Not by the chart, but by you.
And the hardest part is you don't notice it immediately, because ego is subtle. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It tells you things that sound reasonable. Hold a little longer. Move the stop just this once. You can't be wrong again. Make it back quickly. And in the moment, it feels right. It feels like control, like you're taking charge of the situation. But in reality, you're losing it. Because control in trading is not about forcing outcomes. It's about accepting them. It resists. It fights every loss, as if losing is something that should never happen. But losses are part of the game. And the moment you try to avoid them completely, you start creating bigger ones. Because now you're not managing risk, you're escaping reality. You widen stops. You add to losing trades. You convince yourself the market is wrong and you're just early. But the market doesn't care about your timing. It doesn't adjust for your belief. It moves based on what it is, not what you want it to be. And ego cannot accept that. So, it keeps pushing you to fight it, to prove something, to hold on just a little longer, even when everything is telling you to let go. And that's where the damage compounds. Because one bad decision doesn't stay alone. It creates another. You move your stop, then you add to the position, then you refuse to close. And before you realize it, a small, controlled loss turns into something much bigger. Not because the setup was terrible, but because your ego wouldn't let you exit. And it doesn't stop there. After the loss finally hits, ego is still there. Now it's hurt. Now it wants revenge. It tells you, you can't end like this. You need to make it back. You know what you're doing. Just take another trade. And without even resetting, you jump back in. No patience, no clarity, no plan, just emotion. Because now it's no longer about the trade. It's about fixing how you feel. And that's the most dangerous place a trader can be. Because when you trade to fix emotions, you stop thinking. You stop waiting. You stop following rules. You just act. And every action becomes reactive, forced, uncontrolled. That's how one loss turns into many, not because the market suddenly changed, but because your mindset did. And this is where ego does its deepest damage. It disconnects you from reality. It makes you believe you're in control when you're actually reacting. It makes you feel confident when you're actually emotional. It makes you think you're right, even when the evidence is clear. And the longer you stay in that state, the more your account reflects it. Not your knowledge, not your strategy, your ego. And that's why so many traders stay stuck. Not because they don't know what to do, but because they can't accept when they're wrong. Because accepting being wrong feels like losing. But in trading, accepting small losses is what prevents big ones. And ego doesn't allow that. It turns every mistake into a battle. And the more you fight, the more you lose.
And the more you lose, the more ego tries to protect you. Not by helping you improve, but by giving you excuses. The market is manipulated. That setup should have worked. I was just unlucky. And for a moment, those excuses feel good. They take the pressure off. They protect your confidence. But they also block your growth. Because as long as the problem is outside, you never fix what's inside. And that's how ego keeps you stuck. It doesn't just affect your trades, it affects how you learn from them. Instead of reviewing honestly, you justify. Instead of correcting behavior, you defend it. Instead of adapting, you repeat the same patterns. And over time, nothing changes. Different trades, same results. Not because you lack knowledge, but because you lack honesty with yourself. And honesty is something ego avoids, because it's uncomfortable. It forces you to admit things you don't want to see, that you broke your rules, that you acted emotionally, that the loss wasn't bad luck, it was your decision. And that's not easy to accept, but that's exactly where progress begins. Because the moment you remove ego, even for a second, you start seeing clearly. You start noticing the small mistakes, the early entries, the late exits, the unnecessary trades, things that were always there but hidden behind excuses. And once you see them, you can't ignore them anymore. You can only choose to keep protecting your ego or to start improving your trading, because you can't do both. You can't grow and protect your ego at the same time. One has to go. And the traders who move forward are the ones who make that decision. They stop trying to be right. They start trying to be consistent. They stop taking losses personally. They start seeing them as part of the process. They stop proving something and start executing something. And that shift changes everything. Because now trading is no longer about you being right. It's about you doing the right thing again and again, no matter how it feels. And that's where control begins. And once you start operating from that place, ego begins to lose its grip. Not because it disappears, but because you stop listening to it. You begin to recognize it in real time. The moment you feel the urge to move your stop, you pause. The moment you want to revenge trade, you step back. The moment you feel like you must be right, you question it. And in that pause, everything changes. Because now you're no longer reacting automatically. You're choosing. Choosing discipline over impulse. Choosing process over pride. Choosing consistency over being right. And that choice, repeated over time, starts to reshape your behavior. You become less reactive, less emotional, less attached to outcomes. You stop needing every trade to validate you. You stop feeling like a loss defines you because you understand something deeper now. A loss doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you followed a process and the outcome was part of probability. And once you truly accept that, ego has nothing to hold on to because there's nothing to defend, nothing to prove, just a process to follow. And that's where trading becomes different, quieter, cleaner, more controlled. You don't feel the need to jump into every move. You don't feel pressure after a loss. You don't chase after a win. You simply execute, calmly, consistently. And when you operate like that, something powerful happens. Your results begin to reflect your behavior, not instantly, but steadily. Because now your decisions are no longer influenced by ego, they're guided by structure. And structure is what creates consistency, not confidence, not belief, not pride, consistency. And once you build that, everything else follows.
And when consistency starts to show, something else changes. Your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who needs to win. You start seeing yourself as someone who follows a process. And that shift removes pressure. Because now you're not trying to prove anything. You're just doing your job. Trade by trade, decision by decision. You show up, you execute, and you accept whatever comes next. No attachment, no resistance, no ego trying to take control. And that's where real confidence is built. Not from being right, but from knowing you can trust yourself to act correctly, even when it's uncomfortable, even when the outcome is uncertain, even when your emotions are pushing you in the opposite direction, because that's when it matters most. Not when everything is going well, but when you're tested. And in those moments, your old habits will try to come back. The urge to interfere, the need to control, the desire to prove something. Ego doesn't disappear completely. It waits. It looks for opportunities, moments of weakness, moments of doubt, moments where you're tired, frustrated, or too confident. And if you're not aware, it slips back in, quietly, slowly, until you find yourself repeating the same patterns again. That's why this is not something you fix once. It's something you manage continuously, through awareness, through discipline, through honesty with yourself. Because the moment you stop paying attention, ego takes over again, and the cycle repeats. So the goal is not to eliminate ego completely. The goal is to stop letting it control your decisions, to recognize it without following it, to feel it without acting on it. And that's a skill, one that takes time. But once you build it, it becomes your advantage. Because now you're no longer trading based on how you feel. You're trading based on what you've decided. And that difference is everything. Because in trading, the moment you stop trying to be right is the moment you start doing things right.
And when you finally understand that, everything falls into place. You realize that the market was never your enemy. Your ego was. It was the voice that made you hold too long, close too early, jump back in, and ignore your own rules. It wasn't lack of knowledge. It wasn't bad strategy. It was the need to be right controlling your decisions. And once you see that clearly, you stop fighting the market.